don't know about you guys, but it seems to me every freaking time I load up this eShop, there are a ton more cool looking games that I want to throw my money at. And so it's getting harder and harder to pick and choose the ones that are actually worth buying. That is exactly why I make these videos. I have made 10 of these so far. This is number 11. So let's go ahead and look at these 10 eShop games. If you don't see one that you really love, then check those other lists. And if it's still not there, let me know down below, because maybe it'll make the next list. Oh, and spoiler alert, one of the games on this list is probably my favorite eShop game so far. I love the first game on this list, and I've already sunk a lot of time into it, and that's Everspace. The best way I can describe Everspace is imagine taking all the fantastic space combat mechanics from a game like Starlink, then take the randomly generated nature of a game kinda like Enter the Gungeon, and lastly, take the upgrading system from a game like Dead Cells. What evil but awesomely addicting game have you now created in your sick laboratory of mutated video games? Everspace spits you out into randomly generated areas of the universe. Each area may contain enemy ships, story elements, collectibles, materials to mine, stations to upgrade your ship, and so much more. Once you feel you have completely explored an area, or maybe when that area has become a little too hot to handle, thanks to all the enemy ship dudes trying to end your playthrough earlier than you would like, hyperdrive your way out of there into another area of the galaxy. Continue exploring, shooting, and progressing your way through the utterly beautiful and yet extremely challenging universe Everspace has built for you, and see just how far you can make it. And assuming you don't make it, and trust me, you won't, this game is brutally difficult, use whatever resources you found along your way to upgrade your ship, making it stronger by upgrading your weapons, your health, your shield, you name it. Then jump back into an entirely new universe and try again. It has that same addicting nature that Dead Cells has, and it just looks great. Swapping out our spaceship for a submarine, let's take a dive into Abzu. See what I did there? Recently, some of you might remember, I made a video all about indie games I would love to see come to the Switch. And I'm not saying that it was my doing, but literally the next day, Abzu was announced. And while I'm still waiting for the rest of my list to come to the Switch, in the meantime, we can still play Abzu. Typically in video games, the underwater levels are the absolute worst. It's hard to even say that sentence without getting hardcore flashbacks to the Water Temple and Ocarina of Time. Ooh, I finished that game like 17 times and I still get stuck in that temple. However, Abzu takes place completely underwater and manages to be an absolute joy to play from start to finish. And in large part, that's really thanks to there being no threat of running out of air or ever being eaten by a shark. Rather, there is no danger to be found in the waters of Abzu. You are left completely alone to explore the remarkably beautiful underwater world that this game has created. There is so much life to be found in the water, from massive schools of fish to huge freaking whales. The amount of dense life to be found surprised me when I was playing this game on Xbox and PlayStation 4 that the game didn't chug or slow down in frame rates at all. And now to be playing it on my Switch and have it still run this beautifully is just so impressive. The visuals coupled with the music and the exploration, this game feels like an underwater journey. This game is pretty short, and with it being exploration focused with no real challenge on the way, for some of you it might not be worth the price tag, but for me it's that exact open freedom that makes it an experience I wouldn't want to miss out on. There are quite a few games on this list fighting for best art direction, but in my opinion I think my favorite has to be Forgotten Anne. This game is heavily story driven, focusing on the choices you make within the game and the effect those choices have. And it's really hard for me to talk too much about the story because it's full of so much mystery and intrigue, and I don't want to ruin any of it. You play as Anne in the Forgotten World, a place where items that are lost in the real world appear as lifelike beings. The story is captivating, leaving you with choices that will challenge what you perceive as right and wrong. Believe me, you will do things you regret as you discover how everything plays out following the choices you make. But it's the art style and animation that really stands out to me. The way Anne moves, the way she pulls levers, the way she just interacts with the world around her. There's something so charming about all of it. It makes me feel like I'm playing a fantastic anime, something like Spirited Away. It's a linear action platformer spliced with loads of puzzles, but it isn't a very difficult game, with the focus being on the fully voice-acted story. As someone who loved the world of Forgotten Anne, I feel like there is so much replay value here. If for nothing else, just going back through and making different choices and seeing what would have happened instead. Ask me about Grim Fandango.
I don't want people always asking me about Grim Fandango.
Growing up with point and clicks, there were a few that really defined the genre, and I will always recommend others playing them if they never had the chance. Monkey Island being the main one, and Grim Fandango being a close second. And lucky you, whether you have played this masterpiece or not, you can now jump into it on the Switch in this new remastered version. The 3D graphics and hilarious story inspired by Day of the Dead are presented by LucasArts and still holds up today. Just like the original Monkey Island remasters, you can switch between the old and new versions of the game, and other than a few improved textures and lighting here and there, it's really cool to see how much didn't even need to be changed. Oh, and there's even a developer commentary track which has Tim Schafer himself on it. It's just so cool, especially if you're a fan of the game. Really funny characters, interesting locations, and very difficult puzzles. Now, for those that don't know how brutally difficult these old point and clicks used to be, let me tell you, when I played them as a youngin', I used to have a notepad and pen with me by my side at all times. That way I could keep track of the puzzles, the items, and just everything that was going on in the game. Because trust me, this game will not hold your hand, so if you're up for the challenge, I recommend trying it out. This War of Mine is a game about war, but you don't play as a soldier or any kind of military. Rather, you play as the victims of war, doing their best to survive day to day in a land torn apart. You create your own character's story by playing the game and the decisions you make along the way. And those choices, coupled with just the rest of the game, it's just so dark and depressing. You start with a set of random survivors, each with their own special skills. Utilizing these skills are key to your survival. Giving someone the wrong task might not only spell their end, but your own as well. However, utilizing each character's skill correctly can help support your entire base of survivors. Collected items throughout the game can be used to create helpful objects like a bed for your characters to sleep on. And again, certain characters' abilities can lead to them being able to craft bigger and better things. At nightfall, you scavenge for supplies, and it's always a delicate balance between who you take to scavenge and who you leave to rest or keep watch. And if you're lucky, the place you scavenge will be abandoned. And if it isn't, you have to decide whether or not you want to steal from those that live there. And that choice isn't always an easy one. At the start of the game, you'll probably find yourself not stealing from anyone, but as the game goes on and your characters are starving or in immediate need for medical attention, you might find yourself stealing from people who are probably in the exact same position that you are. So in these situations, at what point do you start breaking your own moral code? This is a very in-depth and complex game, and I wish I had more than just this little part of the video to flesh it out. It's not a game for the faint of heart. Even the art style, while fantastic, is just very depressing. But even still, it's another game that's just worth experiencing for yourself. At this point, we've seen quite a few mobile games find pretty big success on the Switch. But Super Brothers is such a wonderful adventure that really stands out to me as more than just a mobile game. Not to say that mobile games are inherently bad, but none have really ever caught my eye like this one. Its gorgeous visuals are often referred to as pixel art, but honestly, I'm hesitant to actually call it that. To me, it's an art style all to itself, something I've never really seen before. And yet, Super Brothers has seemingly perfected its own original art style at the same time as creating it. I suppose you could say the art style is minimalistic, but the more I look at every piece of scenery in this game, the more and more details in the world are jumping out at me. The sound design and the music will also surprise you. It's incredibly eerie and just wonderful. Every sound in this game enhances the experience. The gameplay focuses on puzzles that you discover while exploring the world and paying attention to all those small details. Like maybe something in the reflection of the water doesn't actually exist insist on what it's reflecting. Paying attention to your surroundings is key to progressing through this world. There is also battles, and these battles are as simplistic as a video game battle could possibly be. It just has you clicking on a sword or clicking on a shield, and yet somehow it manages to even make these battles feel epic and satisfying. I can't believe this game was released half a decade ago on phones. It was truly ahead of its time. Oh man, next we have The Gardens Between. Seriously, if you're a fan of gorgeous, fascinating, unique, and stunningly wonderful art styles in your video games, this list is really for you. The Gardens Between is a time-bending puzzle game that has an art style I would pay to see made into a feature film. Each level in this game takes place on small islands, which you run around as the camera spins to follow you. And every island has a different theme, each based on something from the character's past experiences. All of these islands end up looking really unique and cool, focusing on things like music or TV or video games and so much more. But most interestingly, the gameplay doesn't have you actually controlling or playing either of these characters. Instead, you control time, rewinding wherever needed to draw the character's attention on certain objects or parts of the world. Guiding them around this way is how you complete puzzles and progress to the end of each level. In this way, it kind of reminds me of a weird splice up between Fez and Braid, but with a much more pleasant visual style. Not knocking on the way the other two games looked, because they looked great, I just love the way this one looks. Honestly, I just wish the game was a little bit longer. I'm not sure if everyone will consider it worth the price tag, but for me, the game left a lasting impression. It was well worth my money, and if nothing else, it's worth marveling on the art style. Nidhogg 2 is a game that I ummed and ahed about actually putting on the list. Do you guys remember that one game that essentially had two stick fighters with swords trying to stab each other? I had completely forgot that game existed until I saw this, which is apparently its sequel. Weirdly, it looks nothing like the original. I think I preferred the more simplistic art style rather than this frankly grotesque character designs. I do like the new style as well though. Character designs aside, the world in the background looks fantastic. And as I said, I did have some mixed feelings about throwing the game on the list, but I decided to for two reasons. One, it adds some variety to this list for sure, and two, you can't help but laugh yourself stupid playing a game like this with your friends. I would say it falls into that it's so bad it's good category. You and your opponents both die in one hit, and that hit can be delivered in many ways, like the stab of a sword or copping a thrown dagger to the face. And your goal is to reach the end of each level. However, it's also your opponent's goal to reach the other end of the level. The only thing standing in both of your way, yeah, it's each other. And that's truly where the funniness comes into play. Perfectly parrying your enemy's attack and delivering that killing blow is made that much more intense when it means you get to make up some extra ground towards the end of the level. That constant tug of war style back and forth can be exhilarating, and as I said, can lead to a lot of laughter as well as a ton of frustration. Next on the list is a game called Gris, and I'm sorry, I cannot get over how beautiful the games look today. I don't know how these developers create such unique and gorgeous worlds again and again. Love or hate the games on the list today, you cannot deny we have seen some talented artists at work, and Gris is no exception. The entire game may as well be a series of radiant watercolor paintings. While platforming throughout the dazzling environments, you will solve puzzles while being treated to a soothing soundtrack. Again, this is yet another game I relate to Journey, with the focus being on the evocative experience free of stress or difficult challenges, and instead leaving you to explore and interpret a new exciting world. There is literally no way to die. There is no dialogue, no text, no nothing other than your own existence and willingness to discover. Yet it's still incredibly engaging, urging you to continue and marvel on more and more of the world. Abilities like shapeshifting your dress into a cube will allow you to manipulate the environment. The platforming will also have you timing jumps, but nothing will become too challenging or at all frustrating as to keep you enjoying the world in a calm state of mind. For a game that has no written story, it manages to tell one heck of a story. The next game is the one that I said is probably my favorite game on the eShop, and that is Transistor. When I think of Transistor, the first thing that hits me is the music. Developed by Supergiant, who also made one of my favorite games, Bastion, they always go all out with the soundtracks for their video games. In fact, before I even played Transistor for the first time, I was already very familiar with its music. I had already been listening to it on repeat the weeks leading up to playing. Next to the music, it's the hand-drawn art style of Transistor that steals my heart. Set in a futuristic dystopia, the cyberpunk visuals are heavily inspired by classic anime. Every location is breathtaking, every character design is unique and interesting, and all of this before we even get to the brilliantly smart and engaging gameplay the game has to offer. You play as a lounge singer named Red who has had her voice stolen. Armed with a talking sword, you set out on a mission to regain her voice. The combat is extremely rewarding, with the real fun being the ability to freeze time and strategically plan out your moves. Then, once you restart time, you get to watch the moves you selected either fail or succeed, and that is a thoroughly addicting gameplay mechanic. But don't worry, you still need to apply quick real-time reactions throughout the combat, which combine strategy and action gameplay in a perfect way. And the depth of the game grows when it comes to unlocking abilities, each of which can be used passively, actively, or used to augment the strength of another skill. Transistor has so much to offer, and I absolutely adore this game. I cannot recommend it enough. Along with all of Supergiant's games. There's a new one coming as well called Hades, and I can't wait for it. And so that is another 10 eShop games worth buying. I would love to know your favorites, so let me know down below, and while you're down there, make sure you hit flip all over that subscribe button. Click or tap on this video right here. I'm gonna go ahead and link the entire playlist of these videos so you can go through and find more games worth buying on the eShop. Merch and video game giveaways as always down below. And now I'm gonna go back to playing Smash.